Welcome back to the After Credits Scene, guys. It has been a while since I've been able to be with you, but that means we have new Marvel content to talk about. Super excited to get into all of that. Before we do, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. And do me a favor, share this video or share the channel with somebody who maybe loves Marvel but doesn't really know about us. We're well on our way to 200 subscribers, but we need your help to do it. If you are here for non-spoiler reviews, we got that coming up here in just a second. But check out the links and the timestamps below. You can click on whatever you need to see and jump right to that. We're going to talk spoilers. We're going to talk Easter eggs. We're going to talk what this means for the future. And we're going to talk about those awesome post-credit scenes as well. There is a whole lot to get into, but I first want to kind of give a spoiler-free review for anybody that's interested in the show, interested in the movie, but hasn't really seen it yet, doesn't really want to get into those things. As far as the movie was concerned, I loved it. I think if you look at the Rotten Tomatoes scores, obviously critics are kind of, it's certified fresh, but it is in the 80% range. I think there's a little Marvel fatigue going on with critics. I think when you have a company like Marvel who's not really beholden to anybody but their fan base, and they're trying to bring in new fans, and they're finishing up a story the way they want to finish it up, they really don't have to impress the critics. The critics aren't really beholden to anybody either, so they really don't. They can tell you what they think. And as far as the movie was concerned, it's got some weird elements. It's a wrap up of a third movie, so if they haven't watched the other ones, standalone wise, there's a lot to enjoy about it, but there's a whole lot of things that I think some critics are going to dislike. So that explains that ranking. On the flip side of that, the fan rating is darn near 100%, and that's because the people going to see this first and foremost are going to be Guardians fans, Marvel fans, and they're going to love it. It's been a while since we've had some Marvel content, and they've been itching for this one. So take that with a grain of salt, but from my perspective, it was an enjoyable movie. There's a lot in it. It kind of feels like a long movie at times, but long in a satisfying way. It was everything that I wanted out of a Guardians movie. It had some of that quirkiness, that weirdness, but it felt like a better companion to the first Guardians movie than it did to the second one. I really liked the second one. I loved Ego. I loved that whole storyline. I loved diving into Quill's relationship with his father and getting some of that backstory. But this one felt like it had higher stakes. This one wrapped up very well. This one was a lot more violent than the other ones in terms of some gore and some different things like that. It definitely earns its PG-13 rating and kind of skirts with an R rating in some spots. In that regard, it has the Marvel Studios' first F-bomb in an MCU movie, an intentional F-bomb. But other than those kind of things, we took our 12, almost 13-year-old with us to see the movie. He'd seen the other ones, and he enjoyed the movie as well. But it was a little gruesome in parts, and so you're going to have to kind of decide for your own selves whether or not you want your kids to see this. But it had a lot of humor that did not go over his head. He keeps reminding me that it was sad, even though there's some sad moments in it, but that was what he took away from some of it. So take with that what you will. That doesn't really give away anything, but very moving and emotional, I guess is the way to put that. Other than that, a lot of really great moments and fight scenes and character development and new story. I liked the villain. I liked that corner of the galaxy that we got into, and it pulled some stuff in from some other movies. So if you watch the other ones, particularly including the holiday special, there was a lot of things to really enjoy about it. If you haven't seen those, you can still go into it and really like it. I think as far as a standalone Marvel entry, it was really great. I heard somebody on Twitter say it was in their top 5 of Marvel movies. 26, 27 movies in, that's a hard position to put this movie in. I would definitely say top 6 or 7. There's still some other ones that I would say have earned their spot up there as well. And Guardians is up there. This is a really good one. So I think if you're okay with some of those elements, you like the other Guardians movies, it's going to be a really great movie, entertainment-wise and story-wise. It wasn't just, lots of lights and flashes and thrills for thrills' sake, but it actually had some meat to it. So Other than that, I liked the story. I liked the way it wrapped up. I liked the villain. I liked the character development, the new people they introduced, and where it's headed for the future. So if you're into all that, go see it. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And that's about as unbiased as I can get. Obviously, I love Marvel stuff, and every Marvel entry has been great. But it was fun. It was a fun movie. I enjoyed Quantumania, but this was fun in a different way. It took that weird, quirky stuff in another direction, and even though there was some depth and some meat to Quantumania, these worlds somehow felt more fleshed out. I think the quantum realm is such an obscure thing, it was a little easier to just kind of throw stuff in it and not really have any explanations, but this stuff really had some explanations to it. Every place they went had purpose, and so in that regard, some of the back and forth stitching you probably appreciate more than you would of Quantumania, but it still had a lot of those same beats to it. So again, a good movie overall, probably worthy of the critic rating, but also very worthy of the fan rating as well, both of which are relatively high. Let's get right down to a spoiler review here. So if you haven't seen the movie, you don't want any spoilers, you're going to have to leave now. Bookmark this, come back later. I loved it. I think starting off, the All Guardians logo, instead of having the typical regular Marvel logo with all the different characters in it, was a really great homage to the original Guardians cast, and being able to see all those elements. That they also connected with the end credits, where you had pictures from all the different Guardians movies. This movie was really a love letter to this trilogy, and it was a fitting conclusion without spoiling or putting some kind of abrupt ending to the Guardians and the space galactic side of the MCU. Although Captain Marvel has that as well, I kind of feel like a lot of times she's the bridge between the two, and Star-Lord, because he's been off away from Earth and been running away from it, hasn't really had much of a need to connect to Earth. And so in that regard, this galactic side, the Guardians kind of fit that bill a little more than Captain Marvel does. And I'm interested to see how they do that. So I thought this was a good ending for the trilogy, but not so much an ending for that aspect of the MCU, and there was ways to kind of carry it forward. Immediately, the tone is set. This is going to be Rocket's story from the get-go, getting the little raccoons in the cage, and then the CG, that first moment where they zoom in on little Rocket's face, and I knew this is where they're going to transition to older, more mature Rocket. And the only thing I was waiting for in that moment was to see how good the CG was, and looking at the little hairs on the face, the eyeballs, the coloring. And from the get-go, I knew the CG is not going to disappoint. The VFX in this movie are not going to disappoint. And I was absolutely right. The movie from start to finish is visually stunning. It is, you get immersed in these worlds. The difference between what was costuming and what was makeup and what was actually real, the lines get blurred a lot, but you get immersed in this world. It was fantastic. Right down to some of the slow-mo fight scenes and all the homages to everything else was beautiful. I really love that. Right there at the beginning, the one thing I really noticed is out of the 3 Guardians movie, this is the first one that does not start with a dance number of some kind. Now, the first one arguably is just Quill dancing around to his headphones, but dance number nonetheless. Then the second one, we get Groot dancing around while the Guardians are fighting the Obelisk with the music going on. This one, while there is music going on, you're kind of getting caught up with all the characters. They're walking around nowhere, and again, one of those elements that you had to have watched the holiday special to kind of know this is their base now. I thought it was really easy to give the title Nowhere Guardians HQ, that it was their base. And so, but you get kind of this back and forth. There is an Easter egg contained in that opening song that I thought was a really cool entry, and just a really cool addition to the song, and also a really fitting connection to Rocket. Like I said, this being his story, having the song Creep, not having it as high energy but just having this mellow moment, it kind of set the tone for things are good, things are okay, things are calm, except for Quill still really struggling with the fact that he doesn't have Gamora around. And that kind of set that tone in the Guardians Holiday Special as well, that Quill is really struggling with the fact that Gamora is around, but it's not actually her anymore. And having this song play through in an acoustic feel, talking about I'm a creep, I'm a weirdo, what am I doing here, all these kind of things. This search for identity has kind of been a thread through all the Guardians movies, and really wrapping it up by telling Rocket's story and everybody getting to kind of come to terms with themselves through Rocket was a really fitting way to end that, I thought. I mean, the writing in that regard was very spot on and very, very intentional. And it wasn't just, I kind of threw this together. It was, you could tell there was a lot of heart and intentionality about everything they wrote in here. But again, one of the Guardians trilogy, the only non-dance intro that we've gotten. Although the dancing at the end was more fitting than the dancing at the beginning that we've had in some of these other movies. It was kind of a nice flip, an intentional flip. The only thing that I will complain about with this movie, actually, this is probably my only complaint. The other one is just kind of a commentary. My only major complaint is how abruptly they introduced Adam Warlock. There was no, even if the battle had started with them not with an explosion and them not knowing who he was, this cut to immediately seeing Adam Warlock and seeing his face and seeing him flying through space, it definitely still fit the story that, wow, this is about to get crazy fast. But as far as introducing a new character like that, and there not being much time to spend on seeing him for the first time, or even Aisha telling him to go, or even just an explosion and going, what happened? Who did that? And then some reveal of him coming out of the dust, like, okay, was a little off-putting for no reason, really. That's the only thing that really bothered me about it. It's like, that for everything else that had a really intentional setup, that felt off-putting in a way that did not seem intentional to me. It didn't even, I don't know, it just didn't feel right. And so it was very abrupt. You find out real quick, it throws you into the story, it throws you into the problem immediately. Everybody gets hurt, the Guardians are all in shambles, and as they go to try to help Rocket and heal each other, Quill puts the med pack onto Rocket, only to find out that it is potentially killing him. They find out very quickly that there is something on Rocket's heart that is preventing him from being healed. And they find out very quickly that some programming in that is going to kill him. Basically, that he has some kind of proprietary tech that has a failsafe that nobody can dissect him, nobody can, that if they try to heal him, or if they try to get into his tech, that thing is going to kill him. And you quickly find out that the High Evolutionary is the one in charge of that, and they have to go in search of, first and foremost, the tech and what that is and how to figure that out, and that leads them to the High Evolutionary. And it takes them to some really interesting places. And as the story progresses, I love that you were getting these flashbacks to Rocket's story. It wasn't just Rocket laying on a table the whole time. You're getting his flashbacks as though he's dreaming, and being able to kind of come to terms, because he obviously doesn't know while he's laying on this table that they are on their way back to his creator, that they are coming face to face with the person that created him. And when he wakes up, his job, his only goal is to save his friends who just saved him. And then once they're safe, then he decides, I'm done running. And that's when he gets his moment. But all of those flashbacks and all of that backstory playing off as Rocket remembering these things, and us getting this story as well and learning what happened to him, I thought was really well done. And then right down to James Gunn's decision to not allow us to see footage of what exactly the High Evolutionary did to Rocket, but getting to see it through the Guardians' eyes and getting to watch this really upped the stakes of that and kind of let your imagination run with how violent was this, especially if Nebula says this was worse than anything Thanos did to me, and feeling sorry for him, but understanding this is why he didn't talk about this. This is a part of him that I think it was good that they learned it that way, that he didn't have to tell them because it was his story to tell, but they were already committed to him before they saw any of this. So seeing it really just strengthened their resolve to go and save him and go and make him whole again, rather than, oh, we feel sorry for you and now we're your friend. In that regard, it was a really great character study on family. So I really love the way that they did that. You find out some really interesting things, like the High Evolutionary is the one that created the Sovereign, and that's how they're connected. The whole, the High Evolutionary using his tech and using the things that he learned to create this business that funds what he does, and allows him to have this place where he can, again, kind of have his fingers and his tentacles, so to speak, all over the universe. This place called the Orgoscope, which was, again, within the High Evolutionary's kind of wheelhouse, that it was this bioengineered space station, was very interesting. And from the get-go, there was an element that I noticed early on that I really appreciated throughout this movie. When they approach the Orgoscope and Quill is having a conversation in the depths of his ship, and he's recalibrating different elements of his ship to be able to get through these barricades, to get to the Orgoscope, to get to this base. I remember thinking that I loved that Quill was competent, that he wasn't having to fly by the seat of his pants, and it wasn't as, oh, well, I just accidentally did this, or it was an accident. You get a lot of that from the get-go in Guardians 1, where he almost gets attacked taking the Power Stone. He gets attacked when he tries to sell it. He runs into Rocket and Drax and Groot in the kiln, and he gets out by just sticking with them. There were very few moments that felt like Quill knew what he was doing. They joked about how he didn't really have a plan, and that kind of happens in the second one as well. And he's kind of ruled by his emotions in the second one. So none of it felt intentionally competent in terms of what he could do or what the Guardians were capable of. And from the get-go, it was obvious that, okay, these guys do know what they're doing. These guys do have capabilities. They are smart. They are able to handle these things. And that thread carried itself throughout the whole movie as well, particularly whenever the Guardians have that hallway fight with all of the security on the High Evolutionary ship, where they get to fight and they battle all these guys, and it's just 5 or 6 of them, but there's 30 or 40 of these other guys, and they just take them out like it's nothing, and they're having fun in the midst of it. I loved seeing the Guardians be competent. That was a really cool aspect of this movie that just, it made it feel like, wow, you don't want to mess with these guys, in a way that felt more solidified and less like, wow, these are all kind of wild cards. But you really felt that element of, wow, they work well together. The High Evolutionary's line from the beginning was another thread that ran all the way through this, and showed this idea of, never meet your creator, people having problems with their creator, and there's all kinds of theological implications to that, that we either vilify or glorify our own creators in our own eyes. That sometimes that blinds us to the truth, and sometimes that opens the truth up to us, and there's all kinds of theological implications there. I will save that for some other videos, because the youth minister in me is just really wanting to dive into all that. But the High Evolutionary says, I want you to be not as you are, but as you should be. That sounds great. And that comment in moral hands and in trustworthy hands and in safe hands is a great thing. We think about how a parent would mentor a child. That sounds like a great thing. But towards the end of this, we find out that the High Evolutionary is very selfish. He has his own agenda. he is not moral, but he is amoral, because his need for creation is about self-gratification and about his own dislike of the universe. And at the end, you get the conversation where they approach him and they say, this is the weirdest way I've seen somebody want to destroy the universe. And the High Evolutionary then reveals what he feels like is his altruistic higher purpose, which is, I don't want to destroy the universe, I want to perfect it. Which makes him a little Thanos-like as well. Thanos wasn't about destroying the universe, he was about making it better by destroying half of the universe. And depending on what side of that you're on, is either a really great thing or a really horrible thing, and it's hard to get behind. But Rocket is able to realize that this guy, and he even says it, is he has a problem. He just doesn't like things the way they are. He doesn't want to perfect the universe. He just doesn't like the universe the way it is. That he is not able to accept things for the way they are. And I thought the connection to that line with the people that Rocket befriends to begin with, Lila, Floor, Teefs, these things and especially these characters that we would look at, these animals that we would look at and say they're cute, they're cuddly, they're majestic in their own right, and the High Evolutionary has twisted them into something that he would consider an experiment, an evolution, but we would look at and be a little put off by. I mean, the walrus in the wheelchair and the bunny rabbit coupled with the spider is a little off-putting when you first see it, and it's kind of scary, but Rocket has befriended these people, and they are loving, and you love them not because of what they look like on the outside, but because of who they are on the inside. And that's the whole theme and the whole story of the Guardians from the get-go, is this ragtag group of people who are family and connect because of not just shared interest and shared needs, but because of who they are on the inside. And it's even more apparent in the connection between Star-Lord and Gamora all throughout the show, all throughout the movies, right down to this different Gamora who Quill is in love with, who she is inside, and she doesn't see that version of herself, who she should be, who she could be. And she has to come to terms with, okay, I see that there is this part of me inside, and Quill has to come to terms with, I have to be okay if she doesn't choose that version of herself. And where's the middle ground? And some of those lines at the end where Gamora stops and says, I can see how we would have had a lot of fun together. That kind of came each other's direction a little bit. That mutual respect and those kind of things, that thread was really well done throughout all of these movies. And that line from the High Evolutionary at the beginning that gets twisted and played with over and over throughout all the characters, through Drax, through Adam Warlock, through all of these different people, was really well done. Some funny moments. The first time I saw the Carrot Man on the Orgoscope, I thought Broccoli Rob, the broccoli-looking character from the Quantum Realm, it made it feel like, oh, there's a species of these people. As soon as I saw the High Evolutionary evolve a turtle, I was really hoping for a Ninja Turtle, and we're just going to call that character Feral Ninja Turtle. But the idea was not lost on me that there could be Ninja Turtles in the MCU that the High Evolutionary created in some way that were not created with ooze. But that's a story for another day, and that's a wild theory, and it's a whole lot of fun to think about anyway. So, there were several things that I thought were good character points, and I just want to point out a couple of them. I've already pointed out one of them with regard to seeing the Guardians as competent. The other two were this version of Gamora and seeing her character not just immediately fall in line with the Guardians, but to be headstrong and to be a little more violent and to be a little more shoot first, ask questions later, or not ask questions at all, really helped me see why Thanos liked Gamora more than she liked Nebula. Nebula was more concerned with pleasing her father than she was about being like her father, and Gamora was more like her father and didn't really care about pleasing him. And to the point that she would almost poke at Nebula the same way that Thanos pokes at Nebula. Oh, quit groveling, quit begging, quit, just, do it or don't do it. Nebula was the one that wanted a family, but fought against it so hard because she knew that that's not what Thanos wanted. When Nebula never wanted that, and she ended up finding it. First with the Guardians, and then later on with the Ravagers, and you see that family, people who accept her and don't expect anything out of her, as opposed to Thanos, who always expects something out of her and has something hanging over her head. It was about control, and it never was about that with the Ravagers or with Quill. The other one was obviously Rocket and his backstory with exactly what happened when he tries to escape, when he finds out that the High Evolutionary did not value him because he was a creation, but valued him because he had an intellect that he wanted, because he was jealous of him, that love and that not even admiration, but that obsession with, that kind of the idea that he was just kind of keeping him around to study him. That twisted version of I value you was I only value you for what you can do for me. And the moment where Rocket realizes that, and he realizes that he has an identity, not just a number, that he needs to get out, he needs to take his friends with him, and then that act of sacrifice, that act of I'm going to get us out of here, is the one thing that caused his friends to die. And he blames himself for that. And the moment that he gets out, that his friends are killed, that he lashes out at the High Evolutionary and disfigures him, and then gets a gun for the first time and realizes I can fight back. I don't have to be told what to do, is this defining moment where you find out all in about a minute that he is, why he loves guns so much, why he never wants friends, and also why he feels like he's never smart enough or strong enough, is because he's always worried that he's got to be bigger, he's got to be stronger, he's got to be smarter and faster so that the people he cares about don't die, or that he never lets himself get close enough to people that can die, which also really solidifies why he allowed himself to get close to Groot, is because Groot was a character that didn't have a lot of language, that Rocket had to learn how to speak to in his way, and also is very difficult. Groot is almost immortal in the regard that he can adapt, he can evolve on a whim, he is a protector, he is someone that if he dies, you can replant him and regrow him, and that becomes somebody that Rocket is going to keep around, and it's easy for him to love him and connect to him because there's very little chance that he dies, and so all of that was kind of summed up in one scene there, and you get all of that. It was very well put together. I thought Aisha's death was very quick, and obviously necessarily quick, but so quick that you didn't get a chance for Adam Warlock to really stew in it long enough for you to feel what I think you could have felt even more when he ends up joining the Guardians, when he's sitting off in the corner at nowhere and watching everybody dance at the end. I felt like there could have been more of a payoff there, but it was really satisfying to see him in one of the end credit scenes, and we'll get to that in a minute. A lot of really high points as we kind of wrap up this, our spoiler review here. Seeing Groot with wings was fantastic. Seeing the obelisks again, and the moment where Mantis, who was not with the Guardians when they fought the first obelisk at the Sovereign's homeworld, where she gets to say, wait a minute, these guys only eat batteries, they only eat energy, they don't eat people, and she goes to calm them down, and she does it with her intellect, not with her powers, where she understands something that they never paid attention to, which was these characters are not as scary as you think they are, and they end up becoming another ally in the fight rather than something to be scared of is a whole nother metaphor and storyline. And it was a really cool payoff to be able to use those characters and to have them near the end, to know that Mantis is going off into the great beyond with those three obelisks was really, really cool. Seeing Kraglin have his moment where he learned what Quill learned about his power when it came to ego, which was that Yondu did not use his head to try to power his floating arrow, that he used his heart. And Kraglin getting to have that moment, almost like Quill did, where it was kind of a fatherly figure, and Kraglin gets to have that connection and have his hero moment. And then the joke with Cosmo, who was also a really fantastic character. Her and Kraglin getting to have this moment, and this it played off for humor where she's a good dog, was really, really funny. And all of that there at the end, with Nowhere coming literally out of nowhere. And I thought the name was a little more fitting too, because Nowhere is not a specific set of coordinates in space. If it can move, it can be anywhere. So where is this planet? It is called Nowhere because it doesn't exist anywhere. I thought that was really awesome. And being able to utilize it in that way was really cool. But that portion, all of these people showing up, the fight scene with Adam and the High Evolutionary and going back, and everything encompassing that third act, all of it felt like huge galactic consequences and very high stakes that didn't make me feel like, man, they could have really used Captain Marvel, or they could have really used this or that, or why didn't they call this person? It was all about them, and it didn't need those elements, and it was plenty satisfying in that regard. I thought the payoff there at the end, where Rocket figures out and he sees the listening on the inside of his cage, that he is actually from Earth, that he is a raccoon, and the joke through the whole thing where nobody ever called him a raccoon. They called him they called him a rabbit, they called him a badger, they called him a squirrel, everything else but raccoon. And then he's the one that gets to own it and say, I'm Rocket Raccoon. And you get his full hero name. Was really, really cool. And a whole lot of fun, a really inventive way to add that. As they wrap up and all the Guardians get to kind of go their own different directions, Nebula leading the city and being the one that kind of takes charge there, and in a way where she is taking care of other people, was really, really awesome to get to be the leader in a way that she wants to be the leader, where Rocket is actually the captain for all the jokes they make about I'm in charge, who's in charge, this person's in charge, I thought the raccoon was in charge, for him to actually kind of be that, and for Quill to actually be the one that salutes him and acknowledges him. Groot getting to talk was an interesting moment. Obviously, at the end of the first Guardians movie, he says, "We are Groot," instead of "I am Groot." Gamora actually understanding him to realize that she's a little more connected with him and has that ability more so than she realizes, and her moment with Quill there at the end. I have to be honest, though, when I heard Groot actually say, "I love you guys," instead of "I am Groot," it was the first time that I actually heard Vin Diesel's voice, and for a split second, the movie felt like the end of a Fast and Furious film. That I thought they were about to talk about family, but still, really funny. I love, it passes so quickly. You go, oh, he just talked. But my favorite moment there was the moment where Drax gets to become a dad again, where he is taking care of all of these children, and where everybody is dancing at the end of the movie, and he's with these children, and suddenly he dances again, that he dances for them, not for him. That signifies this long-running theme that he doesn't dance because that's how he noticed his wife, that he fell in love with his wife because she was the only one not dancing at this party, that he doesn't dance, she doesn't dance. Groot, little baby Groot, did not dance in front of Drax, and then for Drax to actually dance for someone else was a really great full circle moment. They're just, all of it made for a very satisfying ending to these characters. I didn't feel bad about oh, I'm not going to see them again, or when are they going to pop up again? I felt confident and glad that they were getting that part of their story, and it felt okay if I did not see them again. The other element that I wanted to kind of throw in there that I thought was, this is a very clever writing thing, and props to James Gunn. From the get-go, when Quill is confronted with a task and everybody says it's a trap, and Quill says, no, it's not a trap, it's a face-off. One, I thought it was telling of his character that I'm not bumbling into something. If I am going into a situation knowing full well that someone's trying to trap me and I'm going there willingly, it is a face-off. I am going to specifically encounter the person that thinks they are trapping me for the sole purpose of staring them down and confronting this, which is exactly what Rocket did through the whole movie as well. But the final act where they fight the High Evolutionary and he literally has his face taken off was a clever little writing moment and a clever little addition that it's a face-off, quite literally. And this moment where you see this person who is trying to perfect and create beauty and intelligence underneath is actually very broken and missing parts of himself, quite literally, that he just has those parts stretched over him to create this mask, this facade, was a great storytelling device, and it would be my only critique of the High Evolutionary. I told you I had one complaint, and that was how quickly Adam Warlock came in. My only critique is that in that regard, the High Evolutionary played to me more as a good metaphor for the inner demons that the Guardians were working through, and less of a true threat to the universe. If nothing had ever happened to Rocket, perhaps the High Evolutionary would have found him eventually, but the Guardians would have had no reason to get involved had something not happened to Rocket. They would have been off in their own little portion of the universe until the High Evolutionary caught up with him, and then they might have had to do something about it. Otherwise, the High Evolutionary just continues to do what he's doing, and maybe it has universal consequences and maybe it doesn't. But the fact that these two forces came together and they were forced to deal with each other, almost like a theological debate between, can an unstoppable force interact with an immovable object, and which one's going to win? And so he didn't play off as much as a threatening villain in that regard, more so than something that they had to confront. And so I was never really scared of him, more so than I was, how are they going to get out of this? And there was a lot more elements in there about that and about coming to terms with their own world and their own inner demons than it was about, hey, we got to beat this guy. Because you really kind of thought from the beginning, I think they can handle this, but how are they going to get out of it? So in that regard, a little bit of a critique, but satisfying nonetheless, and a really cool kind of nod there thematically to have an actual face-off. Let's get down to the post-credit scenes. There were two really good post-credit scenes. You get to see a new version of the Guardians protecting a planet, presumably a planet where, if you remember, when Quill is on Morag and he gets back on the Milano, and there is a girl that was asleep on the Milano, that's the same race of people, so you get another throwback to Guardians 1, that same race of people. Presumably they're on their planet or a place where they live, that alien race, and the Guardians are protecting these people from that some threat, and you get a whole new lineup of Guardians, which included Adam Warlock. It included a much more large version of Groot, which was very, very cool. And then one of the little girls that they had saved from the High Evolutionary ship, who ends up being called Phyla. And if you look in Marvel lore, her name is Phyla Vell. And her story, I'm sure, is far different in the MCU than it is in the comics, but that character being someone that potentially could grow up and be a part of the Guardians. Cosmo was there. And you have these characters that could start their own Guardians movie, potentially, because you could use Vin Diesel's voice, you could use Bradley Cooper's voice, or you could use somebody else and still kind of keep that lineup I thought was a good choice and a really awesome way to say, hey, the Guardians are still out there, but it's a different iteration of those Guardians. And then again, the addition of Sylvester Stallone's version of the Ravagers, they could be out there and kind of be a spin-off somewhere as well. The second post-credit scene showed Star-Lord back home on Earth, where he gets to come home to his grandfather again and interact with him, and it shows him talking about mowing the lawn and doing normal things. And then when it fades out, you get a tagline that says, "The legendary Star-Lord will return." That was really cool for me. I'm sure there's some things out there that said, oh, he hasn't said that he was or wasn't returning, but I thought it was really cool. And to me, outside of the tagline at the end of Infinity War that said Thanos will return, which was really gut-wrenching, the tagline, "The legendary Star-Lord will return," was my second favorite little blurb at the end of any one of those movies. I really loved the way they did it. It was actually done different than the other ones. The other ones are black background with white lettering. This was the opposite in the Guardians font as well. And so, but I loved seeing that. It kind of gave you some more hope, like, oh, I'm still going to get to see some of these characters. And now that he's on Earth, maybe there's going to be some more interaction there. Maybe he pops up in some really interesting places. I think that's going to be a fun cameo when it does happen. So I'm excited to just see where he pops up and what he's been up to in that regard, whether he has his own tech on Earth or any of those things. So, but there was an Easter egg there that we're going to start off with, and we're going to work back to all the other Easter eggs as well. So let's get into it. Right there in that post-credit scene, as his grandfather's reading the newspaper, the headline in the newspaper says, "Kevin Bacon alien abduction," and that is a direct reference to all of the storyline that happens in the Guardians Holiday Special, where Drax and Mantis go to Earth to kidnap Kevin Bacon because they think it's going to make Quill happy. And so that was a really cool Easter egg. The prison gravity gag from the first Guardians movie makes an appearance in this movie as well. You remember in the first movie, that's how Rocket says he needs to get into this control booth at the prison. He gets into the control booth and he's rewiring things, and everybody's about to shoot at them, and he plugs something in and he turns off the artificial gravity, and all of the security guards end up floating in the air. You get that same scene where Quill is in the control booth of the orgoscope, and he convinces someone to get him into the system, and he turns on the thrusters of all of the security guards, and rather than the gravity turning off, all of the thrusters on all of the security guards go off at the same time, and they start floating in the air. And so it was a really cool callback to that scene, if you will, but he just done it a little different way. I thought that was cool. At one point, when Quill's bag is dumped out on his ship, you see a strewn out set of cards. You have some Garbage Pail Kid cards. You have some cards that have Alf on them, which is an old 80s show about an alien that lands on Earth. His ship is broken and he can't get back home, and he ends up living with this family, which is really interesting that Quill ends up living back home. But even though he has a name, they end up calling him Alf for alien life form. So just the addition of some of those little throwbacks, and obviously because Quill has all of the stuff from when he was a kid, those are some of those elements as well. The Broker, the character that Quill goes to sell the Power Stone to, that Yondu comes back to in the first Guardians movie, makes an appearance. He's living on Nowhere, and he shows back up in several different scenes. Just the reference to the idea of kaiju when Rocket or Quill tells Groot to go full kaiju, that he grows, that he gets bigger, I thought was really funny. And that idea of a kaiju is obviously a Japanese movie idea, that the giant creatures that Godzilla would fight, or that who Godzilla is as well, is a kaiju, this big monster type character. One of the shirts that Quill wears is for a cereal from the 80s and 90s called Freakies. If you you can actually go online and look up and buy that shirt. But if something's more interesting is if you look at the type at the cereal box for the Freaky cereal, on the back of it, there is a listing of all the different characters and what their names are and their personalities. And there are some eerily similar qualities that these Freakies characters have to the Guardians of the Galaxy. One who always wants to be called Boss, one that is secretly in love with Boss, all those different elements. One that is the smartest and thinks he's the smartest and likes to tell everybody he's the smartest. All those different things are really interesting, and it's a really fun read. At the end, when Quill flies out into space and he puffs up as though he's about to die, which is a throwback also to the original Guardians movie, and probably a response to, well, if you're in space, you don't just freeze, your body puffs up. Was probably intentionally done as well, and it played off his humor because he's all puffy. But the moment where Adam Warlock saves him is a legit recreation of the creation painting with God and Adam reaching out to touch each other's fingers, and could be played up and dove into. You could dive into that with all sorts of different theological implications because Adam Warlock is a creation. He is, Quill just helped destroy one of his creators, and that he is a creative being. All those different things. You could spend a ton of time just going into all those different metaphors and what that means, and odds are we'd all probably be wrong because it probably isn't that deep. But and then, like I said, the Kevin Bacon alien abduction story that was in the post-credit scene. All of those things were really great. The right down to the 80s version of Counter Earth, which is the time period when the High Evolutionary had visited Earth and kind of fell in love with that style. And then all the different alien species, you could kind of pause the movie and go back and see different characters and see all the different cameos. Ving Rhames makes a cameo right there at the end. He's a Ravager. All these different things are definitely big, really cool things in this movie. And it's one of those that, like, I can't wait to watch over again. And so I hope you guys liked it. I'm curious what you guys think about it. There's a whole lot more to dive into with this movie, and you can check that stuff out on TikTok. Just a reminder, please like and subscribe to the channel. Share our channel, share our videos with other people you think might be interested in it so we can help get to 200 subscribers and well beyond. And check out some of our other videos that we have over here. There's a ton of stuff to sink your teeth into. And as always, guys, when the next one drops, we'll catch you right back here. Later.